Okay, so I finished letting that render out. And you can see it's got a beautiful mirror ball there. Okay, that's thin film. Now let's talk about emission. Emission is seriously cool because I'm just going to pick a new material here. Standard surface. Okay, and let's give it a color. I don't know why I keep going to that color. I don't mean to because I don't like it. Okay, so give it a color, and I'm going to let it be shiny. That's fine. And we're going to go to emission. And emission means it emits light. And you see as I increase that number, and you can go kind of high with this thing, it starts to turn white because it means it's emitting light now. And you can change the color of the light that it emits. And I'm going to assign that here. And when I render that out, you'll see that it's glowing. And it is now a glowing ball of light. And if I increase that number high enough, it will, in fact, let me just show you. You can see what it does. It will emit light, like cast light on other objects. Let me make sure he's close enough to the the caterpillar. So you're going to see a greenish cast of light on the caterpillar if I increase that enough. Yep. This is so cool. And it acts like a light. Okay, and so, you know, there are times that you're going to want to do that to get a light source. And you want to do that with things like lamps or the moon, maybe the sun, because it does cast light. It literally emits light. It's fabulous. Okay. I'm going to close AOVs. We're not going to work with that. That's advanced. And so if you're working in here and you're applying some of these maps, you're going to scroll down here. I'll talk about the special features next. You're going to have your maps down here, and it will show you if there's a map assigned to any of these, it will appear here too, as well as have an M where the map is. And so you have all these different places where you can see all your maps. Okay. Opacity is a more advanced thing, and we're actually going to talk about this in the Lights and Materials class, which is 2410. And then there's Bump, and this is where you can attach a map to get some texture. Again, this is more advanced stuff, and then Tangent. So we're going to talk about those things in the Materials class. But for the basics for this class, that's enough for you to get started on working on materials. While we're in here, I want to show you how to deal with your background if your background comes in and you want to change it. And I'll show you what I'm talking about here. I'm going to clear this out entirely. Trash can. Yes, I want to reset. And standard. Okay. So what I'm going to do is go to Rendering Environment. And I have my map right here. I'm going to take it and I'm going to drag it and I'm going to drop it into that slot as an instance. And you'll see my background there. What this is now going to allow me to do is make adjustments to my background map. You can control the height. See, this is where it puts, say I just want to see sky, I don't want to see the ground. I like that I can see the ground, or I want to see more of the ground. The height will allow me to adjust where on the horizon that my map goes. Okay, that's the height part. You know, I've never played with the rotation. Oh, rotation spins at 360. Say I didn't like where that was, so I want to rotate it or adjust it, because you see, maybe that's showing up in my scene and I don't want it to. I can rotate this so that I can get a different view of the background. Exposure can make it brighter. You can blow it out. You can make it darker. And you may want to work with that. You can animate this. You may want to work with that if your background's too bright or too dark. You can make that adjustment. You can also adjust the contrast. You give it a tint. Let's see. If I check background blur, this is what I was saying earlier about how my scene was a little pixelated, but I didn't care because I wanted to blur it. You see what happens when I do this? Whenever you blur out a background, you create this 3D sense, field of depth to your scene. And let me render this out. Okay, so that's what it was before, and now you're going to see what happens that I blurred it. It's going to make it feel more three-dimensional. And that's why it didn't matter that my background was a little pixelated, because it was going to blur it anyway, and it softened out all the pixels. You see, that really now feels very three-dimensional. It feels very real life. And that's how you do that, just by dragging that over. I'm going to stop this here. It does enough in the beginning that you can see it. By going to your environment map, dragging it straight into a slot, and then making adjustments. You can even customize your own background. You can add additional light. So this gets some of these features get really advanced. And remember, this is a basics class. I'm not going to show you everything because I want you guys to focus on the basics in the beginning, because it's a lot. It can be overwhelming, and you don't want to overwhelm yourself any more than you already are. But yeah, that's a great way to make adjustments to your background very easily. Yeah, I like that. That's where that is. Okay, and so those are basic materials. Play around with them, start building your material library. When we go to Skills USA for the state championship and for nationals, we always bring with us we're allowed to, maps that you can use, textures that you can use in the competition. And so I tell students from the very beginning, just start building that library of textures, because you never know what you're going to need or when. I mean, everything and anything you can think of. Just look around the room and say, okay, here's a texture, here's a texture, here's a texture. You know, bricks, wood. They tend to do a lot of fish in these competitions, so fish scales. Because at the end of the day, what you're doing with these textures is you're simulating rather than modeling detail. And I will show you guys, let me do, I'm going to do this as a separate video. I'm going to show you guys how to, in video games, whenever you're really close to something, they tend to model it. But whenever you have something in the midground or the background, they apply texture maps so that it appears that your objects in the background have been modeled in detail when they have not. And if you've ever been in a video game and you get really close to something in the background, it starts to, you get up to it, it looks flat and pixelated. And that's why. It's just a texture map. They didn't actually model that building. And I'll show you how to do that in a separate video. But here you see I've got this really great scene that went from flat to this just by adding textures. Okay, So we'll stop this here, and I'll do a separate video next on putting it all together.